beginning the concentration and retrospection section of The Phoenix by Manly P. Hall. For years, students of occultism in America have been searching for a safe and sane path of discipleship, for methods advanced by metaphysical teachers are unsatisfactory and even hazardous. Uncounted disasters may be traced to unwise efforts to awaken latent superphysical forces. Nearly all the yogas, with the possible exception of Raha Yoga, have been so diluted with tantric sorcery that to attempt their use is to become unpleasantly involved in black magic. Raha Yoga is the princely discipline, but without the constant guidance and closest confidence between disciple and master, tragedy is almost inevitable. The American public has gone through a terrible orgy of trick breathing, eye-rolling, and blank thinking. Our lack of knowledge of Eastern metaphysics has made the perpetuation of fraud so simple that scarcely a community has escaped. The reaction is now toward more intelligent directionalization of effort. Nearly everyone realizes that he lacks proper control of his faculties and has little or no influence over his impulses and appetites. The desire for self-improvement being universal, it is natural that the question should be asked how order can be brought out of this chaos of conflicting emotions and elements in the body. Before it is possible to advance a solution, it is necessary to carefully analyze the problem, presuming, for the sake of argument, that which cannot always be presumed in fact, namely, that the occult exercises now in vogue for development purposes are authentic, esoteric instruction. We have an incongruous situation. Individuals with no understanding whatever of the fundamental principles of metaphysics are dabbling promiscuously with the most dangerous of all sciences, that of operative occultism. These exercises create distinct vibratory rates so radically different from those of the individual who is attempting to superimpose them upon his organism that the result is physical disorganization. Man's normal functioning results from a fine equilibrium of all his parts. In the average equilibrium of all his... I just read that, damn. In the average person, there is no faculty of part either so much higher or lower than the rest of his balance is destroyed. I gotta read that over again. In the average person, there is no faculty or part either so much higher or lower than the rest that his balance is destroyed. In other words, our eating is on a level with our thinking, our actions synchronize with our desires, and our ideals, while generally the highest part of us, are still in reasonable relationship to the whole. True, there is discord in the body, but for the most part this discord is a minor key. Nature affects the growth of the soul by achieving, through gradual environmental modifications, the improvement of the entire nature. Where we are is determined by what we are, and each is placed in a world not too far beyond his capacity to understand. It is then that occult exercises, intriguing the mind, lead to excesses which may bring down life in ruin. A right thing is only really right when it is in the right place, and methods of development which may bring a properly qualified Kliya to the dignity of an Arhat will destroy the reason and well-being of the person who has not received the necessary preliminary instruction. This instruction is seldom given in American metaphysical circles because of the spirit of haste, which is our national disease. It is little short of a crime, in fact. It is criminal to collect a group from the streets to whom even the term occultism is a stranger, and then promise these same people that through some Asiatic technique they can acquire control of the physical forces of their lives in 10 simple lessons, etc., etc. The rationale of nature is thus violated. The laws of life are put at variance with life's purpose, and the farce rapidly turns into tragedy. As we have suggested, all other things being in themselves honest, the fault lies in the attempt to storm the gates of heaven, or to force upon oneself a state of inharmonious with the qualifications of the nature. The average individual is not fit to contemplate the profundity of universal mysteries, and when he attempts to do so, he simply sprains his intellect. It is absurd for men and women with no comprehension of the meaning of life about them to attempt to visualize or feel nirvana. When the uninformed goes into samadhi, he is not likely to return because, not knowing how he got there, he would not be able to find his way back. Metaphysical distances and intervals are very real, and it would be easier for a small child lost in the heart of Africa to find its way to civilization than for the unqualified student to return from those invisible worlds which are separated from this earth by immense intervals of quality and consciousness. Enthusiasts, of course, assert that it is otherwise, but enthusiasts are not wise. Enthusiasm is one of the emotions that is not permissible among the elect. Our attitudes toward life create their invisible counterparts in the subtle substances of the casual spheres, becoming powerful factors in occult development. The Orient and the Occident are not only separated from each other by vast oceans, but by even wider intervals of attitude. The East is metaphysical, the West is physical. The East is ascetic, the West is materialistic. The East is extraordinary. The East has extraordinary powers of concentration and continuity. The West has very little of either. The East has all eternity in which to accomplish. The West regards 5 minutes as a period long enough for almost any attainment. These variances in racial attitudes and beliefs render it absolutely necessary to modify Eastern occult exercises before they can possibly serve the needs of Western students. Most Asiatics in this country have never made changes and modifications, and therefore they cannot understand why the majority of their students fail, and why the most sincere die within a short time. In their philosophic intercourses with India and Persia, the Greeks brought most of the Oriental exercises into the Hellenic states prior to the Christian era. Pythagoras, the greatest of the Greek school, having been initiated at Elora and Elephanta, was unquestionably instructed in the esoteric practices of the Brahmins. If other evidences be lacking, the fragments of his esoteric disciplines that have survived support this viewpoint. We find that the Greeks modified the Asiatic disciplines, bringing them into harmony with the great body of Western thought. Okay, before I continue, here is the artwork. Through Platonism, the Oriental traditions were widely disseminated. and perpetuated to this day in reasonably complete form. Although Plato has not been properly interpreted for many centuries, the Greeks devised a positive approach to truth. Instead of the universe absorbing man as in the Asiatic mode, they conceived man absorbing the universe. Pythagoras taught perfection through the glorification of self, that is, through release of all the potential powers of self, whereas the Orientals taught perfection through the debasement and renunciation of self and the denial of all individual existence. It is not difficult to see that to the Western mind, individuality is the cornerstone of life. In the last analysis, however, both schools have the same ultimate, both achieve perfection, and the state itself is identical in both systems. However, the psychology of the approach is entirely different, and this difference is not only an intellectual one, but expresses itself through every nerve and fiber of the Occidental organism. To deny this expression is to throw the whole life out of harmony with both its environment and its racial plan. Hence, when that which is naturally positive attempts to become negative, discord begins becoming more acute as the sacred premises of Occidental development are violated. The question then naturally arises, what are the disciplines peculiarly, damn, I can't say that word today. The question then naturally arises, what are the disciplines peculiarly suitable to the Occidental world? Where can those disciplines be found, and how can they be applied in an effort to accelerate the perfection of the organisms? Before taking up these questions, one other point must be made. No occult development can produce permanent results which in any way compromises the laws of life. There can be no growth apart from growing, nor can any individual improve more rapidly than he can grow. Growth does not imply a sudden spurt in any one direction. It involves the symmetrical expansion, the increase of all parts in harmony with the law of natural unfoldment. In other words, true spirituality cannot in any way exist apart from a spiritualized condition of the whole constitution, mental, spiritual, and physical. A man cannot be spiritual in his right hand and physical in his left, nor can one organ exceed another in virtue, because all partake of the diffusion of life permeating the whole, and cannot minister to one apart from the rest. A man can no more overreach himself spiritually than he can be truly virtuous on Sunday and sinful the rest of the week. Sunday piety is not a virtue. Sunday piety is not virtue. We know, nor can any false stimulation of any single part which is not justified and substantiated by the testimony of all other parts, be considered legitimate spiritual growth. Our attitudes toward life, our capacity to learn, our value sense, and our morality, these are all chemical products of the separate parts of ourselves combined to form ethical compounds. Hence, our ability to see intellectually is invisible from what we are, and no matter how hard we try, we simply cannot be more than the sum of ourselves, nor appreciate qualities with which our whole being is not en rapport. The student who feels that he will become spiritual in spite of himself has a rude awakening ahead, for he can only gain true metaphysical power because of himself. Even the simplest exercises which can be designed for the improvement of man's physical state cannot, therefore, be successfully performed unless the whole disposition is placed under an increasingly rigid discipline. By this discipline, we do not mean to imply inhibition, but simply a realization of the interrelationships existing throughout the human constitution. The simple exercises herein outlined involve no extreme asceticism, nor is any radical departure from the natural order of life either necessary or desirable. The discipline is concerned largely with attitudes of those disquieting fluxes which destroy the harmony of the inner life. Mental peace and emotional poise should be the first cultivated. With these results in a greater degree of corporeal harmony, with harmony provides the proper environment for the directionalization of the abstract faculties. Concentration is impossible, or at least its success is seriously jeopardized by interpretive attitudes. As the Bhagavad Gita so aptly puts it, only the man balanced in pain and pleasure is fitted for immorality. Many people believe that peace will result from the cultivation of a spiritual state, when in reality the spiritual state results from the development of peace. Perfection is the end and not the means. Perfection is a consummation of enlightened effort, and is bestowed only upon those who have greatly achieved in other things. When the mind is torn with discord and speeded up to an abnormal intensity by uncontrolled nerve impulses, or the emotions are rendered intemperate by grief, fear, or hate, no illumination can result from the performance of occult exercises. Only disaster can follow unbalanced effort, or efforts supported only by unbalanced functioning. So East and West alike warn their disciples that before they put their feet upon the path of wisdom, they must place their own being in a state of order. Concentration is the first exercise which we will take under consideration. Concentration is simply the pointing of a mental effort, the focusing of the mind so that the object of the attention shall be undivided interest. Concentration involves the coordination of the intellectual parts under the domination of the will, the function of the will being to contribute intensity and continuity to mental effort. The average person has poor continuity. He cannot carry a train of thought to its logical destination. In other words, he cannot think things through. Impulses foreign to the subject intrude themselves, and the sequences are lost. The untrained man is also superficial as to the degree of his mental effort. His thoughts are not sharply delineated nor given proper values, but are so blurred or slurred that they produce little, if any, effect upon his code of action. The purpose of concentration is to be the organization of mental powers, so that the mind actually becomes that which it was designed to be, an instrument for the discernment of relative values and realities. Concentration as an exercise cannot be injurious if practiced with moderation and not allowed to obtrude itself upon the responsibilities of daily life. Mount Everest, the second peak from the right. I guess this is a picture even provided. I guess Mount Everest is over here. Over here. It should be carefully noted, however, that concentration as an exercise is in no way a substitute for labor or action, but it is primarily designed to assist the individual to gain from experience those precious truths which are the beginning of wisdom and understanding. In approaching the practice of concentration, it is first necessary to remove the sense of effort involved. For effort brings with it tension, and this tension, instead of clarifying the mind, upsets the nerves and often results in serious discomfort. Man is a bundle of tensions. The life that he lives is so filled with false incentiveness that nervous debility and deterioration afflict a large part of the race. As a philosophical discipline, concentration must be performed through the gentle application of will, and not by browbeating the thought into a state of groveling servility. Many are unpleasantly surprised at the unruliness of their faculties when attempting concentration. The mind pays but little attention to the will, and our thoughts wander promiscuously through the ether of the brain. After a few unsuccessful efforts, many become discouraged and develop inferiority complexes, while some become so enraged at their inability to think that their emotional reactions render them incapable of concentration. Discouragement, disgust, annoyance, and other destructive reactions can prove serious hindrances to the objective to be reached. While the one who faces even failure gracefully, by his very gesture, achieves a considerable measure of success. The ancients established the desirability of performing concentration in the early morning hours, preferably upon awakening and before rising. The advantages of this time are first that the superphysical entity which is out of the body during sleep has but just returned thereto, and his functioning is least impaired, as the activities of the body have not yet obscured the subtle impulses of the soul. Then, again, there is less tension in the body at this hour, for the objective mind has scarcely resumed the burden of daily cares and distractions. Finally, the vitality which has been stored up during sleep bestows additional strength to the enterprise. In every respect, therefore, the individual is at his best in his efforts at self-improvement. Regularly is also a vital factor. As far as possible, concentration should be practiced at the same time and under similar conditions each day. This establishes a rhythm, and the changes wrought by occult exercises upon the superphysical nature of man are nearly all achieved from continuous repetition over a long period of time. As our habits are the product of repeated impulses, so our temperaments may be molded into nobler proportions by such repetition. Under no condition should a person who is concentrating begin by making his mind a blank. Such a procedure must inevitably thwart the end which concentration seeks to achieve. On the other hand, it is equally undesirable to use any physical object as the focal point for the mental faculties, because such objects lead almost invariably to self-hypnosis. The idea involved is that of an active directionalization of thought. The individual is not trying to become mediumistic or to permit extraneous influences from any level to usurp the seat of reason. Thus, such objects as crystal balls, magic mirrors, lights, and reflecting surfaces are excluded. Nor is it desirable to burn incense or use perfume in the effort to provoke results. Pythagoras suggested to his disciples that their concentration should be upon some natural fact. such as the flight of a bird, the growth of a tree, or the wonder of the human soul. It might even be directed to the contemplation of action, analysis of motive, or the visualization of a place or thing. One of the primary ends for which the Greeks developed these exercises was for the improvement and ultimate perfection of memory, which they regarded as indispensable to the acquisition of knowledge. By memory, however, they intimated a faculty which not only perpetuated the forms and circumstances, but also analyzed motive and causation, so that the incident in all its aspects could be recalled at will by the mind for analysis by the reason of the values involved. The average person, when beginning the practice of concentration, will have the greatest measure of success if he will start by visualizing some simple, familiar object which involves the elements of symmetry, beauty, and high symbolic significance. The lotus blossom or some other beautiful flower would be appropriate. Flowers bring a reaction of peace, and nearly every temperament responds constructively to the beauty which they have captured in their parts and colors. The lotus brings with it a wealth of symbolism, for it signifies the soul floating upon the surface of life's ocean, with its hidden roots deep in matter, but with its glorious head turned upward to the light. The rose is the lotus of the West, the similar significance representing by the opening of its buds the flowering of the ideals of humanity. Having chosen some appropriate figure, the mind should be given the task of envisioning it, and the practice continued until the image can be invoked at pleasure and held for an indefinite period of time. It may require from 2 or 5 years of daily concentration to capture the elusive shape and hold it securely. But the strength bestowed by this exercise upon the faculties of the inestimable value, the flower should be envisioned about 2 feet in front of the face, hanging as it were in space, and after the concentration is sufficient to retain it there, the blossom may be given animation, opening from a bud to a full-blown state. At the same time that the faculties of visualization are projecting the outer semblance of the flower, the mind should be contemplating the qualities of the plant and seeking to fathom the universal mysteries revealed through the blossom structure. Under normal conditions, a beginner will not be able to perform this feat with any marked measure of success. If he can maintain the image for 20 seconds, he may consider himself as unusually successful. Within 6 months to a year, however, he should be able to lengthen the time to a full minute. Under no condition or at any time should the exercise be extended, however, beyond 5 minutes. The average person cannot concentrate for a full 5 minutes upon any subject or object without seriously depleting the mental energies. One particular bit of advice should be borne in mind. When in the process of concentration the image has been created and then some disturbance destroys it, do not attempt to force it back, but consider the attempt finished for the day, and never perform the exercise more than once a day. Most of the unpleasant effects of concentration result from the effort to bring back through willpower and force the fleeting shape of the object. This is always disastrous and is the real reason for the nerve fag of which many people complain who have attempted concentration. I'm going to read that again. If this is always disastrous and is the real reason for the nerve fag of which many people complain who have attempted concentration. Without long practice to strengthen the faculties, all occult exercises should be performed sparingly, always aiming to do little rather than too much. In metaphysical subjects, it is much easier to prevent trouble than it is to mend the damage afterwards. If performed as herein suggested, the exercise can cause no harm to any normal person, but if there is supersensitiveness, subnormal vitality, or any abnormal condition present, these should be corrected as far as possible before any metaphysical exercises are undertaken. As concentration is primarily intended to order the thinking equipment and is the first step toward development of true clairvoyance, it has no direct effect upon the chakras or physical centers of the body and therefore cannot create a condition beyond the control of the individual. Concentration strengthens the mind, and the mind endowed with greater powers of discrimination and the discernment in turn impels the life to more worthy ends. Thus, a circle is established in which each mutually benefits the other, and the entire outlook is ennobled. As concentration is distinctly a morning exercise, so retrospection is the proper discipline of the evening. Having completed the labors of the day, the body, exhausted by its efforts, seeks rest. In the peace of that twilight which divides labor from response, our thoughts instinctively turn toward the actions of the day past. The discipline of retrospection was designed to serve two purposes. First, to instruct the individual to analyze the consequences arising from his daily activities. Everything that we do becomes a causal point from which flow innumerable effects, and retrospection is intended to reveal the true order of these outflowing effects. Again, retrospection is also an additional stimulus to the memory, for it causes the individual, through association of ideas, to live over again the day that is past. From this detached viewpoint of an observer, the obscure issues are clarified and mistakes made evident. Like concentration, the practice of retrospection should be governed by the laws of order and repetition. The process should be the last waking act of the day, when the mind has begun to release its hold upon worldliness and retire into itself. Again, there should be no effort. The events of the day should be allowed to flow through the mind like the passing incidents of a panorama. The course of the picture, however, should be reversed. The mind should work backward through the day, beginning with the last act and ending with the first. The goal should be a smoothly flowing recapitulation of every incident and circumstances of the day. By placing the effect before the cause, as is done in retrospection, we reproduce an entirely new element. The perspective is changed, and what we call facts we find are largely matters of perspective. By approaching the matter from the opposite end of the happening, new values are discovered, and the errors in decisions become apparent. Retrospection is a very good cure for insomnia, having advantages over the archaic method of counting sheep, dashing through a break in the fence. The average person cannot remain awake through a period of retrospection. He often goes to sleep before he has recalled 1/10 of the actions of the day. This, however, is not a cause for discouragement. Since the rhythm of retrospection is established, the process continues throughout sleep. Retrospection is the greatest organizer of life ever discovered, and after practicing it for a short time, an improvement will be noticeable. As the mind grows accustomed to think upon the result of action, it begins to reason by anticipation. The decisions necessary to our daily existence are thus made with gradually increasing ease and accuracy. 5 years of faithful performance of retrospection will lift the individual from the haphazard state of the majority to the level of the philosophic few, for it is impossible to contemplate sincerely upon action without instinctively desiring to improve that action and render it more meritorious in the sight of self, which must always be the supreme judge. Persons with a bad memory, which simply means one that has never been developed or has been broken through abuse, often complain that they are incapable of performing an accurate retrospection. At the same time, most of these people bewail the deficiency of their retentive faculties. At the same time, most of these people bewail the deficiency of their retentive faculties and wish there were some way in which they could improve their memory. Retrospection will accomplish this end, but the correction must necessarily be gradual. Little by little, the ability to remember will increase, and in the smallest incident can be recalled at will. Nothing is ever really forgotten, but very few can tap the storehouse of memory and draw forth the thought pictures accumulated there. Retrospection gives control of these pictures, and a person who has achieved high proficiency in this exercise can go backward not only over the previous day, but over the entire life, recovering each detail and distilling wisdom from every apparently accidental occurrence. Retrospection should not be extended unduly, and if the individual does not fall asleep in a short time, the effort should be discontinued until the following day. In a dream, a person can live over a whole lifetime in a few moments. The same is true in retrospection. A minute analysis of even a well-filled day should not require over 10 minutes, and to lengthen retrospection beyond this point may cause an unpleasant sense of fatigue. Nor should one permit any irritation over inability to rescue some desire, nor should one permit any irritation over inability to rescue some desired thought from the oblivion of forgetfulness. That which cannot be accomplished is best passed over with no emotion except a sincere desire to do better the next time. One other point is involved in the exercise of retrospection, namely the moral or ethical aspect. When the exercise has revealed some complex of action, the individual should make a definite effort to order the circumstances and determine what he should have done under the conditions. He may feel a certain pleasure from the contemplation of a distinctly righteous act. He should also honestly criticize himself without, however, any sense of pettiness where he feels that he has been delinquent in some duty. Retrospection includes not only the living over of the day, but also putting it in order, picking up the broken fragments and loose ends, and preparing the whole temperament for more constructed endeavor in the future. Every retrospection should bring the life up to date, summarizing that which has been accomplished, and, to a certain degree, sensing the direction of future accomplishment. When concentration and retrospection are practiced daily, the entire life will reflect the improvements which right thinking confers. These exercises Giving the proper stimulation to the whole nature will finally bring the student to the path of discipleship. If followed as here suggested, they prepare the conscious nature for its new duties in a larger vista and are the absolute prerequisites of a spiritualized state. And, most important of all, they do not jeopardize the integrity or endanger the health and efficiency of those who practice them. And that's it for today. We'll pick up on the Comité de Saint Germain, the Wonder Man of Europe, possibly tomorrow.